My name is Melissa Carter. I'm 28 years old and I live in Portland, Oregon. I've been hiking solo for about 5 years now. I know the trails around the Pacific Northwest like the back of my hand. I'm careful, I'm prepared, and I've never had a problem. Until last September. I decided to do a 3-day solo backpacking trip on a section of the Pacific Crest Trail near Crater Lake. It's a popular trail, so I figured I'd see other hikers along the way. But when I started the hike on a Thursday morning, the parking lot was empty. Mid-September isn't peak season, so I wasn't surprised. The first day was perfect. Clear skies, beautiful views, no issues. I set up camp around 6 p.m. near a clearing about 8 miles in. I made dinner, hung my bear bag, and crawled into my tent around 9 p.m. At 2:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Not animal footsteps, human footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching on the gravel near my tent. I froze. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure whoever was out there could hear it. The footsteps stopped, right outside my tent. I held my breath. I didn't move. I just listened. Then I heard breathing. Heavy breathing, like someone had been hiking for hours. I wanted to yell. I wanted to ask who was there, but something in my gut told me not to make a sound. After what felt like forever, the footsteps started again. They moved away from my tent, slowly, back toward the trail. I waited until I couldn't hear them anymore. Then I grabbed my phone. No service, of course. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my tent with my knife in one hand and my bear spray in the other, waiting for sunrise. When the sun finally came up, I got out of my tent and looked around. There were boot prints in the dirt, fresh ones, leading from the trail to my tent, then back to the trail. Someone had walked right up to my tent, stood there, and walked away. I packed up as fast as I could and started hiking. My plan had been to spend 2 more nights out there, but I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to get back to my car. Around noon, I passed another hiker, a guy maybe in his 30s wearing a red jacket. He smiled at me. "Beautiful day, huh?" he said. I nodded and kept walking. But something about him felt off. His boots looked familiar. I glanced down. Red hiking boots. The same tread pattern I'd seen in the dirt outside my tent. My stomach dropped. I kept walking, trying not to look back, but I could feel him watching me. About 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. He was following me, not close, but close enough. I picked up my pace, so did he. I started running. I didn't stop until I reached a group of hikers, 2 women and a guy coming up the trail. I told them someone was following me. They looked back. No one was there. But I know what I saw, and I know whose boots made those prints outside my tent. I finished the hike with that group. We all got to the parking lot together. The guy in the red jacket was sitting in a truck, watching us. When we drove away, he followed us for 15 miles until we pulled into a gas station and he finally turned off. I reported it to the Forest Service. They said they'd look into it, but they never found him. I still hike, but I don't hike alone anymore. My name is Amber Rodriguez. I'm 25 years old and I'm from Flagstaff, Arizona. Last April, I decided to do a solo overnight hike in the Superstition Mountains, about 2 hours from where I live. I'd heard the Superstitions were beautiful but challenging, perfect for a spring hike. I packed my gear, told my roommate where I was going, and drove out on a Saturday morning. The trailhead was empty when I arrived. I didn't think much of it. It was early, and the Superstitions aren't as popular as some of the other trails in Arizona. I started hiking around 8 a.m. The trail was steep and rocky, but the views were incredible. I passed a few day hikers on the way up, but by the time I reached my campsite, about 6 miles in, I was completely alone. I set up my tent, made dinner, and watched the sunset. It was one of those perfect hiking moments where you feel totally at peace. But that peace didn't last. Around 10 p.m., I was lying in my tent reading a book when I heard something rustling outside. I thought it was an animal, so I turned off my headlamp and stayed quiet. The rustling stopped. Then I heard a voice. "Hello?" It was a man's voice, close, maybe 20 feet from my tent. I didn't answer. "I know someone's here. I can see your tent." I felt my chest tighten. I grabbed my phone. Still no service. I'd known the area had spotty coverage, but I hadn't expected to need it. "I'm not going to hurt you," the voice said. "I just want to talk." I didn't believe him. I reached for my bear spray and unzipped my tent just enough to look outside. There was a man standing at the edge of my campsite. I couldn't see his face in the dark, but I could see his outline. "Please leave," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't move. I said, "Leave, now." He took a step closer. That's when I sprayed him. I didn't hesitate. I aimed the bear spray right at his face and held down the trigger. He screamed and stumbled backward, clutching his face. I grabbed my pack and ran. I didn't even take down my tent. I just ran. I used my headlamp to follow the trail back down the mountain. It was pitch black, and the trail was steep and rocky, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. I hiked for 3 hours straight. I didn't stop until I reached my car. When I got home, I called the police and reported what happened. They sent officers to the campsite the next day. They found my tent. It had been slashed open. My sleeping bag was gone. So was my food. But they never found the man. A week later, I got a message on Instagram. It was from an account with no profile picture and no posts. The message said, "You shouldn't have run." I blocked the account and reported it to Instagram. But 2 days later, I got another message from a different account. "I know where you live." I moved out of my apartment the next week. I filed a police report, but they said there wasn't much they could do without more evidence. I don't hike alone anymore, and I check my rearview mirror a lot more than I used to. My name is Jenna Hartley. I'm 32 years old, and I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I've been an avid hiker my entire adult life. I've done the Appalachian Trail twice, countless weekend trips, and dozens of solo hikes. But what happened to me last June changed everything. I was doing a 4-day solo backpacking trip on a remote section of the AT in Tennessee. It was late June, and the trail was busier than usual, but I'd planned my campsites to avoid the crowds. On the second night, I set up camp near a shelter. There were a few other hikers there, 2 guys and a woman. We all chatted for a bit, then went to our separate tents. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of someone unzipping my tent. I sat up. The zipper was moving slowly from the outside. "Hey!" I yelled. "What are you doing?" The zipper stopped. Then I heard footsteps running away. I grabbed my flashlight and looked outside. No one was there. I zipped my tent back up and tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been trying to get into my tent. The next morning, I mentioned it to the other hikers at the shelter. The woman, her name was Sarah, said the same thing had happened to her. "I woke up around midnight," she said. "Someone was messing with my tent zipper. When I yelled, they ran off." The 2 guys said they hadn't heard anything. Sarah and I decided to hike together for the rest of the trip. Safety in numbers. That night, we set up our tents next to each other, about 50 feet from the shelter. There were a few other hikers around, but none of them seemed suspicious. Around 1 a.m., Sarah woke me up by whispering my name. "Jenna, Jenna, wake up!" I unzipped my tent. She was standing outside holding her flashlight. She looked terrified. "Someone was taking pictures of us," she whispered.
What?
I woke up to a flash, like a camera flash. I looked outside and saw someone standing between our tents. They had a camera. When they saw me looking, they ran. We both grabbed our packs and went to the shelter. We spent the rest of the night there with the other hikers. In the morning, Sarah checked her tent. Someone had left a Polaroid photo tucked into the mesh pocket on the outside. It was a picture of Sarah and me sleeping in our tents. The photo was taken from above, like someone had been standing over us. We reported it to a ranger the next day. They took the photo as evidence and said they'd increase patrols in the area. But here's the thing that still haunts me. I took a picture of that Polaroid before we gave it to the ranger, and when I zoomed in on the photo later, I noticed something in the background. There was a third tent in the picture, one that wasn't there when we'd set up camp. Someone had set up a tent near ours in the middle of the night, taken that photo, then packed up and left before we woke up. I finished the hike with Sarah. We stuck together the whole time, but I couldn't stop thinking about that photo. Who was out there? Why were they watching us? And how many other women had they done this to? I reported everything to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. They said they'd look into it, but I never heard back. Sarah and I still keep in touch. We both still hike, but we never hike alone anymore, and we never camp near shelters. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments which story was the most disturbing. If you have your own true horror story, feel free to share it below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.